the vast tapestry of the universe, where countless species have emerged from countless worlds. Each has been shaped by the environment in which it evolved. Some rose from gentle, temperate planets with predictable seasons and docile ecosystems, where survival was largely a matter of cooperation and understanding the rhythms of nature. Others came from frigid wastelands or sweltering deserts, shaping them into hardy but specialized creatures, adapted only to the challenges of their particular domains. But among them, there exists a category of worlds so hostile, so brutal, that they are classified under a chilling term whispered in galactic tongues: Deathworlds. Asterisk, a Deathworld is not merely dangerous, it is an ecosystem actively trying to murder its inhabitants at every turn. On these planets, survival is not just about avoiding predators or enduring harsh weather. It is about a constant, unrelenting battle against an environment that produces apex predators as a baseline, venomous plants as casual flora, and tectonic or meteorological instability that makes the ground beneath one's feet as treacherous as any lurking beast. On these worlds, life doesn't merely survive, it wages war against everything around it, including itself. Asterisk, among the myriad Deathworlds cataloged by galactic scholars, some stand out more than others, notorious not just for their environments, but for producing sentient beings that manage to thrive despite, or perhaps because of, these lethal conditions. The beings shaped by these worlds develop not only physical resilience, but a particular kind of mindset of brutal pragmatism mixed with innovation born of desperation. When everything around you is a threat, from the smallest insect to the largest weather system, evolution doesn't allow for weakness. The only species that survive are those that can outthink, outfight, and attender everything else. Asterisk, the galactic community has always treated Deathworlders with a curious mixture of awe and apprehension. Many species, especially those from serene, garden worlds, can scarcely comprehend what it must be like to grow up in a place where a child's first lessons involve identifying poisonous plants, treating venomous bites, or building shelter that can withstand predatory assaults. On peaceful planets, danger is often rare, something contained to specialized regions or seasons. But on a death world, danger is ambient. It is the default state of existence. Asterisk, this reality shapes not only the physical attributes of those who evolve on such worlds, but also their cultures, their philosophies, and even their sense of humor. In places of constant threat, communities either fracture into chaos or forge deep bonds of cooperation. Social dynamics are driven by a need to trust those around you implicitly or to be perpetually ready for betrayal. The cultures that rise from these places are usually pragmatic to a fault. Sentimentality can be a liability, hesitation can be fatal, and any unnecessary expenditure of energy could mean the difference between life and death. When the next crisis arrives, asterisk, yet, the most profound effect of living on a death world is not the development of stronger muscles or tougher immune systems, although those traits certainly help. It is the mindset of adaptation, the capacity for invention under pressure, and the refusal to yield. On planets where the environment itself is a predator, complacency equals extinction. Every generation must become cleverer, faster, or more ruthless than the last. Progress is not a luxury, it is a mandate enforced by the very air one breathes and the ground one walks upon. Asterisk, in the broader galactic civilization, where comfort and technological mastery have softened many species, the survivalist mentality is difficult to grasp. Diplomats and scientists from more peaceful planets often look upon Deathworlders with a kind of condescending pity, assuming that such creatures must be primitive or brutish, shaped more by muscle than by mind. They mistake the hardened demeanor and curt speech for lack of sophistication, failing to realize that when one has survived storms that level cities or predators that strike faster than the blink of an eye, there is little patience left for frills or formalities. Asterisk, what they fail to understand is that intelligence is not ornamental for Deathworlders, it's essential. The ability to problem solve quickly, to improvise weapons from scrap, to build shelters from debris, or to diagnose and treat wounds with limited resources, requires intellect honed by necessity. In fact, in environments where brute strength alone is rarely enough, ingenuity becomes the most reliable weapon. Every successful organism on a death world, from the smallest insect to the apex predators, is an engineer of survival, adapting endlessly to new challenges and enemies. Those that develop true sentience, capable of abstract thought and cooperation, are simply the apex expression of this universal law. adapt or die. Asterisk, when beings from less hazardous worlds encounter Deathworlders for the first time, they are often unsettled by what they see, the eyes that scan for danger even in moments of apparent peace. The practice calm under pressure. The reflexive assessment of threats in every new environment. All of these things mark someone forged in the crucible of lethal adversity. To outsiders, this might look like paranoia or aggression. To the Deathworld born, it's just living. Asterisk, in the grand halls of the galaxy's diplomatic centers and shining trade hubs, Deathworlders walk with a quiet confidence that comes not from arrogance, but from the certainty of having already endured the worst that existence can offer. Where others recoil at discomfort or danger, they calculate, adapt, and, when necessary, retaliate with precision and force. The polished marble floors of star councils might feel imposing to the average ambassador, but to one born on a Deathworld, it's just another surface, another terrain to be analyzed, another potential battleground if things go wrong. Asterisk. The Galactic Summit was meant to be a grand display of unity, a testament to the peaceful ambitions of countless civilizations scattered across the stars. Delegates arrived in shimmering vessels, their hulls inscribed with ancient symbols of diplomacy and wisdom, each species eager to present themselves as enlightened participants in the great galactic experiment of coexistence. The event was held aboard an immense space station, a marvel of engineering designed in neutral territory orbiting a cold, dead star chosen specifically for its lack of strategic value, ensuring no species could claim advantage by its location. Asterisk, the station itself was a masterpiece of architectural harmony, corridors flowing in elegant curves, ambient lighting carefully adjusted for the comfort of dozens of differing biologies. In the great meeting hall, towering banners hung high overhead, each depicting the proud sigils of the gathered worlds. Aromatic filtration systems ensured no scent offended another's sensibilities. A careful blend of atmospheres allowed species with conflicting environmental needs to coexist in the same space, facilitated by subtle, humming technological miracles. Just beneath the smooth floors and polished walls, Asterisk, amid all this preparation, one thing remained unspoken, though it lingered in the minds of many attendees: the decision to extend an invitation to beings from a Deathworld. It had been suggested by certain factions within the diplomatic corps, more as a symbolic gesture than a practical one. After all, such worlds were spoken of more in academic circles, or as tales of caution for fledgling civilizations. The idea that beings from such a place could participate meaningfully in a diplomatic effort struck many as unlikely, if not outright naive. Asterisk, yet, the invitation was sent, carried across vast gulfs of space by automated courier drones, encoded with the formal language of galactic diplomacy. Many species viewed it as a token effort, a gesture of inclusivity that would likely go unanswered. The more optimistic diplomats viewed it as an opportunity, a potential bridge to one of the more isolated evolutionary lineages in the galaxy. Others, especially those from the wealthier, more stable civilizations, viewed it as a curiosity at best and a dangerous risk at worst. A species forged by a Deathworld's relentless violence surely could not share the same values of peace, negotiation, and mutual benefit that the summit represented. Asterisk, the arrival of the Deathworld representatives shattered those quiet expectations. It wasn't just that they showed up, it was the way they entered the summit's grand chamber. Every step measured, every glance sharp and analytical. Delegates from more serene worlds, unaccustomed to the bearing of creatures forged in constant adversity, found themselves shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Discussions that had moments before been filled with polite laughter and gentle academic disagreements suddenly felt heavier, as though the very air had thickened. Asterisk, whispers traveled quickly among the gathered species. Security details adjusted their postures, hosts checked and rechecked translation protocols. The presence of beings shaped by a Deathworld brought with it a silent, undeniable challenge to the summit's careful pageantry. This was no longer a meeting of soft worlds exchanging philosophies. This was now a gathering where survival instinct itself had taken a seat at the table. Asterisk. Conversations at the summit had followed a predictable pattern. Delegates exchanged pleasantries, discussed trade routes, agricultural exchanges, technological partnerships, and the usual matters of peaceful cooperation. The summit hall itself, polished to a gleaming finish, echoed with soft, melodious voices of dozens of species speaking through layered translator fields. For many of those gathered, this was diplomacy as it had always been: predictable, structured, and gently competitive beneath a polished exterior of smiles and flattery. But the arrival of representatives from a Deathworld shifted the tone in ways that words alone couldn't capture. It was an immediate aggression or disruption, but something subtler, more unsettling. The shift began with simple, offhanded remarks made during casual exchanges, stories and references casually shared as part of small talk. What began as innocent introductions quickly spiraled into an atmosphere of quiet discomfort, as the realities of Deathworld existence became clear through these seemingly normal conversations. What other species discussed as historical dangers or rare tragedies were mentioned as routine facts of life. Talks about seasons led to descriptions of weather patterns that destroyed entire settlements. Discussions of food inevitably wandered to tales of plants that killed on contact or animals with venom potent enough to drop full-grown adults in seconds. Even casual references to youth were filled with stories of early lessons in identifying lethal wildlife or dealing with infections using improvised treatments. When medical supplies ran out, delegates from serene, garden-like worlds found themselves exchanging uneasy glances. To them, danger was abstract and events studied in history or simulated in controlled environments. Predators, for most advanced civilizations, were creatures locked in wildlife preserves, studied by scholars or visited on educational expeditions. Venomous flora were viewed as medical curiosities, their chemical structures analyzed in sterile laboratories far removed from everyday life. Yet for those from the Deathworld, these things weren't academic, they were Tuesday. It was not the tone of boasting or intimidation that unsettled the gathered representatives. It was the casualness of it all. These weren't warriors posturing for dominance, but individuals for whom hardship was as mundane as breakfast. The normalcy with which they described horrors would have been dramatized in epic poems by many of the assembled species. Yet here, those same tales were shared with the calm detachment one might use when discussing local weather. The cultural shock deepened further as the Deathworlders asked questions of their own. They spoke of defenses against wildlife incursions, assuming that other species surely faced similar issues. They wondered aloud about hunting techniques, curious how others managed resource scarcity during predatory seasons. When it became clear that most civilizations had outgrown or bypassed such threats millennia ago, there was only mutual bewilderment, one side struggling to imagine a life of constant threat, the other unable to conceive of life without it. By the time formal proceedings resumed, the underlying reality was clear. The visitors had not come to threaten, but their very existence was a mirror held up to the galaxy's complacency. The summit had gathered to celebrate peace, but it had also inadvertently exposed the sheltered fragility of civilizations long removed from the raw edge of survival. The gathering of galactic species at the summit had been marked by an era of practiced sophistication. Countless civilizations, some with history stretching back billions of years, had long prided themselves on their mastery of language, diplomacy, and intellectual refinement. Among these societies, the unspoken assumption was that technological advancement naturally coincided with cultural sophistication. The idea was simple: the further a species progressed, the more civilized it became, leaving behind the rough instincts of survival in favor of philosophical thought, art, and measured discourse. It was this assumption that shaped the attitudes of many in attendance. When representatives from a Deathworld entered the summit, the elegant alien diplomats wore their finest ceremonial robes, adorned with delicate filigree, flowing silks, and precious stones mined from distant asteroid belts or harvested from the depths of gas giants. Their speech was carefully rehearsed, every phrase designed to flatter, build alliances, and gently press for advantage without risking open insult. In their eyes, those who came from savage worlds, if they survived long enough to develop intelligence, would still carry with them the crude hallmarks of primitive existence. That assumption began to erode within moments. What was expected to be brutish behavior, marked by loud voices and simple-minded aggression, never materialized. Instead, those from the Deathworld presented themselves with unsettling calm and precision. They listened, far more than they spoke, their eyes sharp, scanning every speaker, every movement in the room, noting the subtle tensions and alliances that many long-established diplomats missed entirely. Where others spoke to be heard, they observed to understand. It became apparent, almost embarrassingly so, that these visitors possessed an intellect sharpened not by academic comfort, but by necessity. Survival on a Deathworld wasn't achieved Through brute strength alone, it required an adaptable mind, quick thinking, and the ability to exploit weaknesses with merciless efficiency. Every negotiation, every political maneuver, was approached not as an abstract contest of words, but as a practical extension of the survival game played daily back home. What unsettled many delegates the most was how effortlessly strategies unfolded. Proposals that seemed airtight began to unravel under sharp questioning. Hidden agendas were exposed not through elaborate diplomatic games, but with simple, direct observation of body language, hesitations, and vocal inflections. Centuries of practiced diplomacy began to look fragile next to instincts forged in constant peril. It soon became clear that these beings were not merely intelligent, they were dangerous in ways that peaceful civilizations could scarcely understand. They thought in terms of contingencies, fallback positions, and resource maximization. They spotted lies before they were fully spoken, caught alliances forming in passing glances, and instinctively positioned themselves near exits, defensive structures, or points of tactical advantage. The underestimation of their intellect, a mistake born from the assumption that hardship must breed simplicity, began to look not just arrogant, but foolish. The summit, once a space of comfortable routines and predictable outcomes, had become something else entirely, a game now played on rules set by those who had spent lifetimes mastering the art of staying alive. What began as a ceremonial assembly of unity gradually evolved into something far different, something the organizers had neither expected nor prepared for. From the polished platforms of the Grand Council chamber to the intricate seating arrangements, dictated by diplomatic precedents, everything had been orchestrated for a demonstration of galactic harmony. There were banners of cooperation hanging from crystal spires, symphonies composed specifically for the occasion drifting softly through the chamber, and dignitaries wrapped in flowing robes representing thousands of years of peaceful cultural evolution. Yet none of that could prevent what unfolded next, not through violence or open hostility, but through something far more profound, a shift in perception that rippled through every representative present. At first, many clung to the ceremony, sticking to prepared speeches, speaking of mutual goals and shared futures, but beneath the diplomatic phrases, an uneasy current was building. The catalyst for this discomfort wasn't aggression, but revelation. Each new detail revealed in conversation painted a stark contrast between civilizations shaped by stability and those shaped by constant adversity. The carefully selected flowers decorating the summit table, species selected for their non-reactive pollens and mild fragrances, might have symbolized peace for many of the gathered worlds, but to those accustomed to survival on hostile ground, they were merely decorations, fragile symbols of a life alien to them. The smoothness of the diplomatic proceedings, the gentle cadence of trade negotiations, began to feel hollow as it became increasingly clear just how differently life could evolve. Under constant threat, delegations from wealthy, tranquil worlds exchanged glances that were polite on the surface, but increasingly tainted with uncertainty. To speak proudly of agricultural advancements, artistic achievements, or cultural festivals seemed inadequate in the face of the casual resilience displayed by those from the harshest environments in the galaxy. They spoke of forging alliances. Others spoke of forging weapons from scrap. They spoke of seasonal harvests. Others described harvesting venom for antitoxins while evading apex predators. The gap between the experiences wasn't just cultural, it was existential. No insults were exchanged. No hostilities were declared. Yet, in those conversations, the summit was irrevocably altered. The underlying purpose of unity remained, but now it felt more fragile, more aspirational than ever before. For the first time in the summit's long history, many of the elder civilizations present were forced to reckon with the quiet, unspoken truth that their comfort had made them soft. Their stability had dulled the sharpness that once may have characterized their ancestors. What unsettled them most was not fear of being attacked or conquered. It was the dawning realization that beings capable of surviving the most brutal conditions imaginable didn't see their achievements as extraordinary. The dangers they described weren't spoken with pride or defiance, they were spoken as facts, mere footnotes in the long story of survival. To those who lived comfortable lives surrounded by layers of protection, that level of casual strength felt deeply alien. As the summit continued, conversation shifted. Discussions of trade tariffs and cultural exchanges gave way to more guarded questions. Curiosity, edged with a nervous kind of respect, replaced condescension. Even among those who maintained an outward appearance of composure, thoughts churned behind careful expressions. The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders, but also filled with species that had thrived not by avoiding hardship, but by confronting it daily. Asterisk for many. The summit had been intended as a declaration of how far civilization had come, but the presence of those shaped by ceaseless danger reminded them that civilization, no matter how polished, was only one phase of existence. Survival was the other. Asterisk.